Hi, it's Anna Mason, and in this watercolour tip video I wanted to show you my method for getting a really smooth looking sphere. Specifically, I'll show you how I painted this P so that it had a really smooth transition between its darkest tones or values and its lightest highlights within it. It's all about working in layers so that you can gradually create the subtle shifts in tone. I worked from a photo, which meant the lighting of the P stayed static, making it easier to observe and paint. I made a pencil outline of the edge of the P, and then I lay down my very first watery pale wash where I try to match to the lightest tones in the highlights on the P. But because it's only darker green that I'll be painting on the P, this pale green can sit underneath that without messing up the colour. So I opted to paint this pale mix all over the P. As I do this, I apply in the direction of form of the sphere as if I was painting on its surface. This way, if I get overlaps with my paint, they're going to help to create its form. Once that's dry, I go straight in with the very darkest tones on the P, the shadow in the top left. And as I apply it, I use the tip of my brush to feather the edge where I'm going to need to transition smoothly into a lighter colour. Now the lightest and darkest ends of the P's tonal range are established, it makes it easier to work on the midtones. I begin with the darker midtones that connect up to the darkest tones. I work over and into the darkest tones I just painted, which are dry on the paper now so they don't bleed too much. It can be hard to judge how dark to take this mix as I move further out from the darkest tones, so I adjust it to lighten it a little. It's always better to go a little too light when working on midtones because we can always darken with another layer later. Again, I feather the edge of this colour where it's going to need to transition again into a lighter shade. Then I create a lighter and more vibrant mix to work on the midtones that connect up to the darker midtones which are now dry. Again, I paint over them a little to help smooth the transition. And then I work around the rest of the P, applying this mix to any areas this tone or darker, therefore leaving gaps where the P is lighter, and feathering the edge of those lighter shapes as I work around them. Notice how I'm not worried at this stage about smoothing the unwanted hardline edges that have appeared as I've painted. That's because I can see that the area needs to be taken a little darker anyway, so once it's dried off, I apply another layer of this mid-tone mix to slightly darken and smooth the transition again, getting rid of the hardline edges in the process. I then use a smaller brush, which only has a little water on it, to move the paint that's already on the paper and smooth the transitions around the highlights. And also adjust their position so that it matched the reference photo. The position of the highlight is so important to create the 3D shape of the sphere. Because the way we perceive tones is relative to the tones around them, once I've darkened the highlights, I can now be clearer that I need to darken my darkest tones some more. I then go through the same process again with the darker midtones and lighter midtones, using a smaller brush this time for some more control and so that I deposit less paint on the paper and am therefore less prone to get unwanted hardline edges. Working gradually in layers like this also allows us to correct our colour mixes as we go. And because the way we perceive colour or hue is also relative to the hues that we see around it, this is really useful when you're trying to achieve realism and accuracy. Once I darkened the pod around the P's, I did a final, very subtle darkening of the highlights using just water on the brush again. Now the P looks really spherical and like it's popping off the page. This method keeps you firmly in control, able to position the shifts in tone precisely in a way that's really hard to do with a wet-in-wet approach. I hope you'll get your sketchbook out and give it a go. A full step-by-step tutorial of this P-pod is available now in my online school. If you've enjoyed this tip video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'd love it if you'd share the video with your friends. And if you'd like to take one of my tried and tested step-by-step tutorials for free, hop on over to animasonart.com where you'll find even more resources to help you pick up your brush and paint the way you've always wanted to. Remember, you won't improve your painting unless you make the time to paint, so be sure to schedule in some me time this week and paint something you love. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon with another tip for creating watercolours with wow.